Hello and welcome to Forgotten Ties. We are explorers of the hidden connections that bind us, the whispers of fate, and the moments that defy all logic. What happens when the phantoms that haunt your sleep, the faces that only exist in the geography of your nightmares, step out of the darkness and into the harsh, unforgiving light of reality? Arthur Pendleton lived a life measured in right angles and hard numbers. At 47, he was a senior risk analyst for a major insurance firm, a man whose entire career was dedicated to predicting the unpredictable, to quantifying disaster. His apartment was a testament to this orderly mind. Sterile white walls, furniture placed with geometric precision, not a single book spine out of place. He was a man who believed in cause and effect, in data points and statistical probability. He did not believe in ghosts. He did not believe in fate. And he certainly did not believe in dreams, which is why the woman was becoming such a profound problem. She had started appearing 6 months ago, not as a fleeting image, but as a fully formed, recurring presence. She was always standing in the same place, a vast library, with shelves stretching up into an impossible darkness, and the library was always on fire. Flames licked the bindings of books, smoke coiled like angry serpents, and in the center of it all, she stood, perfectly calm, watching him. She was not a generic face. She was specific, terrifyingly so. Her hair was not brown, not blonde, but a stark, metallic black, pin-straight, falling to her waist. But it was her eyes that held him captive. One was a piercing, intelligent green. The other was a milky, clouded white, completely blind. This stark, unsettling asymmetry, the vibrant life next to the pale void, made Arthur wake up with his heart hammering against his ribs, his spreadsheets and mortality tables feeling utterly useless. He tried to rationalize it. It was stress. It was the low-grade hum of urban anxiety. It was perhaps something he ate. But the dream persisted. It became more frequent, more vivid. He started to smell the smoke long after he was awake, a phantom acridity in his sterile apartment. He, the man of logic, started doing illogical things. He bought a new pillow. He tried meditation, which he found infuriatingly pointless. He even considered seeing a therapist, but the thought of trying to explain this spectral, heterochromatic woman to a stranger seemed more absurd than the dream itself. His meticulous life began to fray. His focus at work, once legendary, was now fractured. He would stare at complex algorithms, and all he could see was the contrast of that green eye and that white eye. He was losing his grip on the empirical world, being pulled under by something he could not analyze, quantify, or insure against. One rain-slicked Tuesday, after a particularly harrowing version of the dream, this time, she had lifted a hand toward him, her palm covered in ash. Arthur found himself in a diner he didn't remember entering. He was exhausted. The coffee in his cup was cold. He had a napkin and a pen, and without conscious thought, his hand, which usually only signed checks and typed on keyboards, began to move. He sketched. He drew the pin-straight black hair. He drew the sharp line of her jaw. He drew the knowing green eye, and he shaded, again and again, the empty, blind white one. He stared at the crude drawing, a new kind of dread settling in his stomach. It wasn't just a dream. It was an obsession. More coffee, hon? Arthur jumped, startled. The waitress, a young woman probably in her early 20s, was holding a pot. She had a tired look, her apron stained with the day's labors. Arthur mumbled a "yes, please," and slid his hand over the napkin, a reflexive gesture of embarrassment. But he was too slow. The waitress's eyes flicked down to the drawing on the napkin. The coffee pot in her hand wavered. A small, rattling sound escaped her throat. The color drained from her face, leaving a pale, sickly mask. "Mr." she whispered, her voice trembling so hard he could barely understand her. Where did you see her?" Arthur stared at her. It's nothing. It's just a dream. A stupid drawing." The waitress dropped the coffee pot. It hit the floor with a crash, shattering and sending scalding liquid across the linoleum. But she didn't notice. Her eyes were fixed on the napkin, tears welling instantly. "That's not a drawing," she choked out, her entire body shaking as she pointed a finger at the napkin. "That's my mother." The world tilted on its axis for Arthur Pendleton. The crash of the coffee pot echoed in the suddenly silent diner, a punctuation mark to an impossible statement. The waitress, Sarah, her name tag read, was trembling, tears streaming down her face, pointedly ignoring the widening pool of hot coffee by her feet. Arthur, the risk analyst, felt his mind scramble, trying to find a box for this information, a category, a precedent. He found none. The situation was statistically absurd. He was a 47-year-old widower, and she was a waitress young enough to be his daughter, and they were now bound by a sketch on a napkin of a dead woman with mismatched eyes. That's impossible," Arthur stammered, his usual measured tone completely gone. "I've never seen her before, I swear. She's just in my dreams." Sarah looked up at him, her gaze a raw mix of agony and suspicion. "People don't just dream about a specific dead woman. Especially not her. Not like that." She snatched the napkin, her knuckles white. "This is Seraphina, my mother. She died 15 years ago, in a fire, at the town library." Arthur's blood ran cold. A burning library. The detail was too precise. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a correlation, and his mind, trained to find patterns, was screaming. "A fire," he repeated numbly. "They said it was an accident," Sarah continued, her voice hardening, the grief momentarily eclipsed by a familiar, old anger. "Faulty wiring in the basement. Case closed. But I never believed it. My dad, he never believed it. It destroyed him. He died a few years later. They said it was a heart attack. I say it was a broken heart." Arthur was frozen. This was no longer a dream. This was a tragedy. This was a 15-year-old wound he had somehow impossibly stumbled into. He should have walked away. He should have paid for the coffee, apologized for the mess, and run back to his sterile apartment and his logical life. But he didn't. He looked at the girl, Sarah, who looked so utterly alone in her grief, and he looked at the drawing of the woman, Seraphina, who haunted his sleep. He wasn't just an observer anymore. The dream had made him a participant. What did she do?" Arthur asked, the question surprising him. "Your mother. What was she like?" "She was the head librarian," Sarah said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. "She was that library. She loved those books more than anything. Except me and my dad. She was fierce, smart. She had one green eye and one white one, just like you drew. She was self-conscious about it, but I always thought it made her beautiful. Special. He had drawn her exactly. A woman he had never met, who died in a fire he had never seen. I don't understand," Arthur said, and for the first time, he was admitting his confusion out loud. "Why would I dream of her?" Sarah shook her head, wiping her eyes. "I don't know, but in your dream, the fire, did you see anything else? Anyone else?" Arthur's mind raced back to the nightmare. The smoke, the flames, the smell of burning paper, and Seraphina standing there, calm. But was she calm? Or was she resigned? He strained to remember. "No," he said slowly, "just her, and the fire. But I smelled something, not just smoke, something chemical, like gasoline." Sarah's eyes widened. "Gasoline?" The report said faulty wiring. They never mentioned an accelerant. I think I smelled gasoline," Arthur said, his voice gaining a strange new confidence. It wasn't a guess. It was a memory from a dream. He left the diner hours later, after giving Sarah his number, a gesture he couldn't explain. He went home, but his apartment felt different. The sterile walls felt like a prison. That night, the dream returned. But it was different. It wasn't just the fire. It was before the fire. He was in the library, but it was dark after hours. He was floating. He drifted through the stacks, past the history section, toward the main desk. Seraphina was there, and she was not alone. She was arguing, her voice a low, urgent hiss. He couldn't see the man she was with, who stood just outside the pool of light from her desk lamp, a menacing shadow. "You can't do this, Marcus," Seraphina whispered. "The land is not for sale. It belongs to the town. I won't let you destroy it." The shadow man laughed, a low, unpleasant sound. "You won't let me? You're just a librarian, Seraphina, a gatekeeper of dusty, dead words. You can't stop progress." "This isn't progress," she shot back. "It's greed, and I have the proof. The original land grant. It's in the town charter. You can't touch it." The shadow moved. Arthur tried to see his face, but the dream blurred. The man leaned in, his voice dropping to a deadly purr. "Proof can be lost, just like people." Arthur woke up in a cold sweat. Marcus. The name echoed in his silent apartment. He had a name. He wasn't just a risk analyst having a stress dream. He was a witness. The name Marcus hung in the sterile air of Arthur's apartment like the very smoke from his dreams. This changed everything. A dream with a face was a curiosity. A dream with a name was a lead. Arthur Pendleton, the man who dealt in actuarial tables, now possessed a single, terrifying piece of data that had no place in his world. He immediately called Sarah. He met her at the same diner, now a strange sort of sanctuary for them. When he told her the name, her reaction was visceral. She didn't gasp or cry. She got very still, and a cold, hard fury entered her eyes. "Marcus," she said, the name tasting like poison. "Marcus Thorne." Of course Arthur knew the name. Everyone in the city did. Marcus Thorne was not just a man. He was an institution. A real estate developer who had, in the last 15 years, rewritten the city's skyline. He was luxury condos, gleaming office towers, and philanthropic galas. He was untouchable, powerful, and notoriously ruthless. And, as Sarah confirmed, 15 years ago, he had been desperately trying to acquire the land the town library sat on. It was a prime piece of real estate, and the historic landmark designation was the only thing stopping him from building his next glass and steel monument to himself. "My mother, Seraphina, was the one who led the fight against him," Sarah explained, her hands clenched. "She dug up the original town charter, the land grant. She organized protests. She was a thorn in his side. And then, the fire. Conveniently, the charter, the original grant, all those dusty, dead words he hated. They burned with her. And after a respectful waiting period, Thorne's allies on the city council pushed through the demolition. He got the land. He built the Thorne Plaza right where she died. The narrative was sickeningly perfect. The motive was clear. The suspect was named. But the evidence was nothing. It was the whisper from a ghost in a dream. He said proof can be lost, just like people," Arthur relayed, the words feeling heavy and dangerous on his tongue. Sarah's face was pale. "He did it. I know he did it. He murdered her." "Sarah, we can't go to the police with this," Arthur said, his analyst brain kicking in, assessing the new risk. "Telling them a man named Marcus appeared in my dream? They'll laugh us out of the building. Or worse, they'll think I'm crazy. We need something real." "But what?" The fire was 15 years ago. The case was closed. The evidence, if there ever was any, was buried under a skyscraper. That night, Arthur didn't sleep. He sat in his dark apartment, waiting. He was afraid to close his eyes, but he was more afraid not to. He needed to go back. He needed more. He finally drifted off, not into sleep, but into the dream, and this time he was an active participant. He wasn't floating. He was walking. He was in the library before the argument. Seraphina was at her desk, under the green lamp. She was looking at a thick, leather-bound book. The town charter. She seemed nervous. She looked up, right at Arthur, right through him. She then took a small, brass key from her desk, walked to a section of the library marked Local History, and pulled out a specific, unassuming book. She used the key to unlock a small, hidden compartment behind the book. She placed a folded document inside and locked it. She replaced the book, her face a mask of grim determination. Then the shadow of Marcus Thorne fell over her. Arthur woke up. He knew what he had to do. He and Sarah went to the new Thorn Plaza. The library was gone. But what about the archives? Sarah made a call. After the fire, most of the surviving, non-damaged archives were moved to the new, municipal annex basement. They were uncatalogued, sitting in dusty boxes. Nobody had touched the local history section in years. It took them hours to get access, using Sarah's connection as the daughter of the martyred librarian. The annex basement was cold, damp, and smelled of mildew. But there they were, boxes upon boxes labeled TLH, Town Library History. They dug for hours, and then Arthur found it. A box labeled Local History, 1880 to 1920. Inside was the book he'd seen in his dream. It was an old, unread history of the county. His heart was pounding. He pulled it from the shelf. His fingers fumbled along the inside of the empty shelf space, just as he'd seen Seraphina do. He felt a small, almost imperceptible ridge. A lock. A key, he whispered. She used a key. A key to what? Sarah asked, frantic. I don't know. Arthur looked at the book in his hands. He opened it, and there, taped inside the front cover, was the small brass key. Seraphina hadn't hidden the document. She had hidden the key. But where was the lock? They looked back at the shelf. It was just a metal shelf. It wasn't the original, ornate wooden shelving from the old library. Whatever she had hidden was either found or destroyed, or... Wait, Sarah said, her eyes wide. She was looking at the key. I know this key. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her own keychain. On it was a small, identical brass key. My mother gave this to me, just before she said it was a key to the truth. I thought she was just being poetic. It opens her old deposit box at the bank. The revelation hit them with the force of a physical blow. A bank deposit box. A key to the truth. Seraphina hadn't hidden the proof in the library. She was too smart for that. She knew Thorn, or men like him, would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. She knew the library itself was in danger. She had hidden the key in the archives, a place of forgotten things, and given a duplicate to her daughter, the one person she trusted absolutely. It was an insurance policy from beyond the grave. They were at the bank the second it opened. Sarah's hands were shaking so badly she could barely sign the access log. Arthur stood beside her, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He, the man of numbers, was betting everything on a ghost. A teller, looking bored, led them into the vault. The air was cold and still. Sarah produced her key. The teller used the bank's master key. A small metal door clicked open. The box was small, metal, and heavy for its size. They took it to a private viewing room. Sarah placed the box on the table and looked at Arthur, her eyes brimming with 15 years of unshed tears and unanswered questions. I'm scared, she whispered. We do this together, Arthur said, his voice steady. He placed his hand over hers. She opened the lid. Inside, there wasn't much. A few faded photographs of her and her father, a single pressed flower, and a large manila envelope. On the front, in Seraphina's elegant, strong handwriting, were 2 words, for Sarah. With trembling fingers, Sarah opened the envelope. It was full of documents. The first was a certified, notarized copy of the original 1880 town charter, the one that explicitly stated the library land was to be held in public trust forever and could never be sold for private or commercial enterprise. But there was more. Seraphina, the meticulous librarian, had done her homework. Behind the charter was a sworn affidavit from a former employee of Thorn's, detailing a systematic pattern of bribery and intimidation aimed at city council members. And behind that, a small audio cassette tape. They found a security guard with an old Walkman. They put the tape in, pressed play, and held their breath. First, static. Then, a man's voice, low, smooth, and full of menace. Marcus Thorn. The offer is simple, Seraphina. A generous donation to the library's acquisitions fund. All you have to do is misplace the charter, just for a little while. And then Seraphina's voice, strong, clear, and vibrating with contempt. That's blackmail, Marcus, and I won't be a party to it. The land is not for sale. Everything is for sale, Thorne replied. It's just a matter of finding the right price, or the right persuasion. It would be a tragedy if something happened to that beautiful old, flammable building of yours. The click of the tape recorder stopping was the only sound. Arthur and Sarah just stared at each other. It was all there. A direct threat. Motive. Conspiracy. They didn't go to the local police. They went straight to the state attorney general's office, bypassing the corrupt city council that Thorne still owned. The aftermath was explosive. Marcus Thorne was arrested during a charity gala, the flashbulbs of cameras illuminating his shocked, arrogant face. The faulty wiring report was exposed as a fabrication. The original fire chief, now living in shame, confessed to taking the bribe. The city was rocked by the scandal. Thorne Plaza became a monument to greed and murder. For Sarah, it was the beginning of a long, painful, but healing process. She had her mother's voice back. She had the truth. She used the documents to sue the city, not for money, but to have the Thorne Plaza torn down and a new, state-of-the-art Seraphina Vance Memorial Library built in its place. And she won. And what about Arthur? The man of logic who had been hijacked by a dream? He went back to his apartment. It was still sterile, still white. He went back to his job analyzing risk. But something was fundamentally changed. The world was no longer just numbers. He had touched something unquantifiable, a mystery that logic could not solve but that his heart had somehow known. He had been a vessel for a 15-year-old injustice, a conduit for a mother's love and a daughter's grief. His nights were quiet now. The woman with the mismatched eyes was gone. Seraphina was at peace. The fire was out. Arthur Pendleton went to sleep, and for the first time in as long as he could remember, he dreamed of nothing at all. He dreamed of silence. And it was good. The ties that bind us are sometimes invisible, forged in tragedy and mystery. But sometimes, they are the only things that can pull the truth back into the light. Thank you for joining us on Forgotten Ties. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the connections we can't always see, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss a single shocking story. We'll see you in the next one.